Welcome to the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast. Today, my guest is Cate Stillman. Cate is an entrepreneur in the fields of yoga, Ayurveda, and business. She's a business mentor, guiding yoga teachers and other healers to make a bigger impact in the world while generating a greater income. Cate has written numerous books, including Body Thrive, 10 Habits from Ayurveda and Yoga, Master of You, a 5-point system to synchronize your body, your home, and your time. And then Secrets of the Six-Figure Yoga Teacher, how to make real money by leading the journey to health and enlightened living. Cate was an early ambassador between the worlds of yoga and Ayurveda and has joined these passions in coaching people around the world to pay attention to their habits and to adjust their daily rhythms to align with nature's rhythm. Behind it all is a vision that when people are well aligned, they are well positioned to serve their own life's unique purpose or dharma. Cate runs numerous online businesses, including Yogi Detox, Body Thrive, Yoga Health Coach Training, and Living Ayurveda, through which she has guided thousands of people to better living. In Yoga Health Coach Training, Cate teaches others to guide similar transformative experiences. Cate is the host of 2 podcasts, Wellness Pro Academy and Yoga Healer Real Life Show. She splits her time between Wyoming and Mexico. She's an untiring steward of the earth and has an insatiable curiosity about, among other things, modern science, local wild foods, and all things health promoting. Welcome, Cate.
Thanks, Ellen. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's really great to see you too. So I wanted to start with this idea of the steward of the earth, because in my exposure to you, both through your writing and through going through Yoga Health Coach Training, it seemed to me that was the place that you really caught your first fire of what you were here to do on this earth. And I wonder, is that accurate? And also, can you speak a little bit about what that trajectory has been like?
Yeah, you bet. So yeah, if we look at just levels of human development and levels of care and consciousness, one of the attributes of higher level consciousness is that you have more planetary consciousness. And so instead of identifying with your nation state, you identify more with the planet and people living all over the planet and animals and species living all over the planet. And so for me, that happened around high school. And I just realized that there was this whole other thing going on in consumer culture that I was raised in, sort of mainstream consumer culture that had been cultivating me to, basically feed into the typical ladder of ascension in terms of like what most developed countries aspire to, which is like make more money and have all this stuff for yourself. And, I saw the limitations of that, I think, before I got totally involved with it. Even though like a lot of the education and what it takes to actually do that, I do really respect. I respect success on a number of different levels, including financial. But it's like if it's not holistic, if an industry creates profit and pollution at the same time and isn't responsible for the pollution, there's an inherent issue in integrity with that. And so I just got into human integrity issues pretty early on. In my, by the time I was 15, 16, I was pretty involved. By the time I was 16, 17, pretty involved on the state level. And then, when I went to school, when I went to higher education, I was pretty obsessed with how do we solve global environmental problems. And so that, multiple species besides humans could survive on the planet, and so that humans could really thrive as well. And so that brought me actually into human consciousness studies. And so by the time I got out of environmental politics, and I was pretty young at that. I was done by the time I was 24. Where I realized I would rather focus on human consciousness than on policy work. And that really brought me into understanding systems that had looked at how do you develop human consciousness, which brought me into of the Enlightenment traditions, including yoga and Ayurveda.
Mhm. And your path with those was sort of simultaneous, wasn't it? That you were doing some trainings in both Ayurveda and in yoga.
Yeah, yeah. I went into Ayurveda, yoga, and Enlightenment trainings around the same time. Yeah, absolutely. And I was a bit of a, I don't know, someone who goes back and forth, a messenger between communities, and helping them understand each other's ways of communicating, vocabulary, and also, the markets of like potential needs. I'm really interested in emerging markets and futurism of like where are we actually creating the next reality, including, how we invest our time, our attention, and our finances. And so just like kind of looking at that, I could see that like the yoga teachers wanted Ayurveda, but the Ayurveda people were making it insanely complicated. And the Ayurveda people needed the yoga communities to basically have a practice and succeed in the United States. And so it was interesting back 25 years ago to like be in on that whole conversation and be part of the, what has grown out of that.
Yeah, I was the word that came to my mind for what you did back then was being an ambassador, where you're really representing the what each had to offer the other.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we still do today. I mean, it's funny for me to look back and be like, well, I haven't really pivoted. We've layered. We haven't really pivoted in, 20 some years. And it's just really true to me what, most of the wisdom traditions bring modern culture is circadian rhythm first and foremost, and I was teaching daily routines of a yogi 20 some years ago in San Francisco, just trying to bring home these core messages of there's a rhythm, and the rhythm is what grounds your consciousness. It's what grounds you in svastha or rootedness in yourself. So that when you're rooted in yourself, you're rooted in consciousness, you're rooted in whether you want to say the intelligence that formed the cosmos, including yourself and everything else, and how do you orient from there so that we're just less disconnected? Because so many of us grow up without rhythm, and that was all before the cell phone, that was all before, the quote-unquote smartphone took off.
Yeah, it's so funny that it's named that, isn't it? So how does aligning with the rhythms line up with vision? Like, where did they come together?
Yeah. So to me, rhythm precedes vision. So if we're arrhythmic, if we're out of rhythm, if we're out of sequence, I also like the word akrama. It's like arita and akrama in Sanskrit of like being against, then it's, inherently it's problematic. Like if we look at what the body does between homeostasis and allostasis, it's like you don't need to be in rhythm all the time. In fact, you don't need to be in homeostasis all the time. That's not how the body finds health. The body actually finds health through allostasis, through infiltration in the immune system or disease or through stress, that we push ourselves out of rhythm and from that find the next level, and the next higher order of integration of energy, really, of universal energy. So the point isn't to be in balance all the time, but if you're out of balance, or if you're out of rhythm, if you're out of the circadian rhythm, which means you're staying up too late, you're waking up too late, you're eating whenever is convenient for you, and for most people in this day and age, that means you're not fasting for long enough. Well, that's enough to pull the endocrine system out of circadian rhythm, which will affect how well you sleep, how well you digest, how easily you eliminate, but also your moods, like how inspired you are, how much you feel, both grounded and available. So when someone is out of rhythm they're naturally out of allostasis. And when you're in allostasis for long enough, it's hard for the physiology to return to homeostasis. There's just too many things that start to go wrong. And then we lose our sense of self. So then we don't even know like why we're working the job, or why we're with this person, or why we're buying this thing. We're sort of compelled, why we're staying up late watching the next series, which we don't even really care about. Like we just lose that deep, deep sense of self. So the opposite is also true. The more we're in rhythm, the more we're in the circadian rhythm, the more we're grounded and we're in an alignment with how nature works, how our physiology works. And we naturally trend towards positive emotions. We naturally trend towards innovation, imagination. These are things that are intrinsically human, that come out of living with the seasons and living with the circadian rhythm and just being in. So there's ultradian rhythm, or living with the seasons, and then there's circadian rhythm. And the more we're just living in rhythm of like the sky gets dark and I go down, and the sky starts to change. It doesn't even get light, but I get up. And if we're up before the dawn, we're naturally inspired and we naturally want to see. So we naturally look to the horizon. We know that's part of why the reason humans are standing instead of on all fours is like we wanted to see further. We wanted to see the horizon. So when we're in rhythm, we naturally stand up and look out, and that's vision. So vision is just a question of like, can you forecast your future? Can you forecast the future you want to step into? Can you forecast the future you want your children or the next generation to step into? That's just been a natural evolution of human consciousness over time.
Can you say more about that? Because I think for some listeners, that will be an odd kind of concept to actually envision the future you want to step into.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in what way? Say more about why that would be a challenge. Or like, is it the sense of victimness, like you're a victim, that you can't create the future you want?
I think that I come in contact with people sometimes who feel like they don't have a lot of influence on where they're going.
Okay, so if that's great. So if that's you, I would first look to rhythm. So I'd say, well, am I going to bed early? Am I waking up early? And am I fasting 16 hours and in an 8-hour feed cycle? Because those are the three things that are going to make the biggest difference. So if you don't feel like you have control over your experience, including how you're designing your future, which means how you're investing your energy, your attention, and your money, then just go to those three things. So the fasting thing is really big, because unless we hunger for something, hunger is desire. Like, unless we really want something, we're going to be in this sort of, I don't know, it's this malaise. It's this complacency, which is mistaken as contentment. And I find this a lot where people they're overweight, they're carrying too much weight, and they have an aversion to cold, and they have an aversion to emotions in general, right? So it's like they'll eat too frequently just as an emotional reaction. And we know that emotions are a habit trigger. So a lot of people are in this emotional eating pattern, and they're staying up too late, and then they wake up the next day and they don't feel very good because they ate too much, they stayed up too late, they're out of rhythm, and then they don't actually have control over their future. They're actually under control of their cravings. So the cravings are being created, at this point, more or less by companies that are designing addictive cravings, whether it's with your cell phone or whether it's a bag of chips, it doesn't matter, or a pharmaceutical drug, it doesn't matter. It's like those things have, been monetized for profit, and they're controlling human behavior at this point around the planet. It's not localized to a nation state anymore. And so, if you want control, you have to take control, which means you need to self-regulate. And the cool thing is like nature's there to help you. Like you watch the sky get dark. And for many people now, they've lost access to dark skies. I guess that's somewhere around 95% of the human population has lost access to dark skies. So it's hard to know when it gets dark. But you can start by just like turning down the lights, getting off devices, setting an airport on your wireless so that it cuts off at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or, whenever it's comfortable. If you're staying up till 1 a.m., then like 11's going to be good for a cutoff. But you want to get to the point where you're easily getting 8 hours sleep and waking up before the dawn. Mm-hmm. And then looking at natural light and then fasting long enough. So if you look at why that works, it has everything to do with starting to digest the toxicity of those cravings within. And so it requires the body to be able to go into autophagy, and auto is self and phagy is eat. So you need to basically eat the toxicity out of yourself by being in a fasted state, which doesn't necessarily mean being hungry. Like a lot of people find that sipping hot water and taking walks and being outside really helps them find true deep hunger, which is a restoration of natural cravings, if you will, of higher order cravings, which then you start to crave real nutrients and you actually crave to feel your emotions instead of stuff your emotions.
Mm.
So I'll just say what that might look like, just to clarify, because there's basically morning fasters and evening fasters. So a lot of people find that, like, given that modern culture has an emphasis on eating the biggest meal at the end of the day, which isn't really great for physiology, but it's what everybody's doing. So it's the easiest shift for a lot of people to make, is if like dinner time at your house is naturally like 6 o'clock and you're done eating by 7 p.m., then you would subtract 8 hours from that. And that's when you would break your fast. So you'd break your fast at 11 a.m. and you'd eat, maybe your first meal, and then maybe have a second meal at 6 p.m. and then you'd be done eating for the day at 7 p.m. And that would allow you 3 hours of autophagy. Autophagy kicks in after the body's been in a fasted state for 13 hours, which means no calories, no artificial sweeteners, nothing, like just water. Black coffee or black tea or green tea is fine. Caffeine's actually fine. Doesn't take you out of autophagy. But yeah, just those things will start to recover someone's ability to feel themselves, and that'll help them feel their power. And from that, they'll start to regenerate vision.
A great answer. So complete, Cate. There's so much to it, but it also makes total sense, doesn't it? That when we are aligned, and there are numerous places that I have read, this is non-negotiable. The alignment is a given, and we can choose whether to align with it or not. But that is the rhythm that we are given to align with in order for things to line up.
Yeah, and what's refreshing, I think, is like both the ancient wisdom and the current science point to the same reality. So we've known this for a really long time. We've known this from the level of health and medicine and disease, and we've also known it from the level of spirituality and enlightenment, the need for fasting, the need for rhythm, the need for bringing awareness into the self. And away from the world. We've known these things for as long as we've known anything, recorded any wisdom as humans. We've known these. And, the modern science or the current science is like, it's pointing in the same, everything's just, in sort of this sort of innovative confirmation with double-blind studies. So that's good.
Well, this is one of the things that I find really interesting also, is that not only is our scientists who are really on the cutting edge saying, "Oh, this is really important," and I'm doing these things in my life to line up with these rhythms. But there's also the other thing I love is there's a group of scientists now who fall into that category, who also fall into another aspect of what I wanted to touch base with you on, which is generosity of sharing the information that you have with others. And this has struck me through the time that I have known you, is how generous you are with what you know. There's no holding back. You have it, you're going to share it. And this is what, scientists like Andrew Huberman, I know you know his work, and out of Stanford, and Sanchin Panda he's in Southern California, but his work on the circadian rhythms, and Lex Friedman and others who have podcasts, many of them themselves, and are saying, this is the information we know. We want to share it. You can do with it as you will, but this is information that should be out there and should be known. So can you speak a little bit about what in your life has set you up to be someone who really cares to share what you know?
Well, I think I just think it's a natural human impulse. Like it's to me, it can't be separated from our humanness. I know when we're dysfunctional, we protect and we covet, we hoard, we do all sorts of things when we're not grounded in our, in our absolute nature. So I mean, my guess is that something between my I don't know. Maybe, who the hell knows? Maybe it's like past life stuff. Like, cause I never had a block around it, you know, like I never had to overcome something with it. I was just like trying to get the loudspeaker, the megaphone, just being like, the people that have the megaphone don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And our children are not going to have a planet. Like, you know, and I've been saying the same thing for, I don't know, I'm 49 now. And if I started when I was 15, I mean, it's been a while, right? It's been 35 years. So I never had a block around it. What I find more and more is where it's gotten really interesting is the willingness to be controversial, like the willingness to not care what other people think. I've just really been interested in truth. And so where this came up recently in the past year was I was interviewing a ton of people on urine therapy. I'm about to interview a ton of people on what's called Panchagavya, which is a specific medicine from Ayurveda that's about 2,000 years old that to me is the best microbiome medicine on the planet and probably will continue to be despite the gains that are being made in pharmaceutical laboratories. Because essentially it's an interesting, I don't know that much about it, so I need to interview like 10 people on it, the 10 leading specialists on it, which is kind of what I went about with urine therapy as well. It's just like, who knows anything? You know, and a lot of people along the way were like, well, aren't you worried about being associated with these things that basically generate disgust? And I was like, no, I don't give a shit because like I'm after truth, right? And if someone is so influenced by culture that they allow other people's opinions to shape how they think, then I'm not really that worried about reaching that person. Like I'm miles away from being able to reach that person. So who I'm interested in reaching more and more is people that are self-empowered, that people are trying to wake up, that people that are curious about their own beliefs and their own assumptions and like, starting to question, like, why do I want to buy that thing on Amazon? Or like, why do I put these particular things in my grocery cart all the time? Or like, do I really like sugar? Or have I been trained to like sugar? You know, people that are sort of in that, those are the people that I've found really resonate with what I'm doing and what I'm saying. So for me, it's just been like truth. Let's go for truth. And see where it leads. And it's led me into pee and poop. I mean, that's honestly where it's led me into like, oh, humans, you know, we only got disconnected from our microbiome and we got disconnected from our ecosystem, and that's disrupted our health because our health is completely networked. It's completely networked with our ecosystem. It's completely networked with life cultures. And the more we destroy the life cultures in our body, the sicker we get, the more we suffer.
I think of you as a collaborator also, and I'm thinking about you. You did some work with Claudia Welch, I believe, at one point, and also it seems to me that any conversation I've heard you have on your podcast or in yoga health coach training has in some way been looking for the connections that that spark one another. And I wondered if you can say anything about collaborations and the part that that's played in your life.
Yeah, so I actually was just editing right now my next book called Uninflamed. We thought it was going to be called Wild Habits, and then I changed it to Uninflamed to speak more to the end result. And I was just writing, there's a chapter in the end on money and one on wisdom. And I was writing about the economic value ladder, which is it's like an analytical theory from economists that dates back to about 1999. They started to look at like humans in a post-agricultural model. We mine commodities or grow commodities, and we make goods, and then we develop services, and then we want experiences. And like each of those bumps up, we're willing to trade more value and have more individuation. So what's interesting is like the cutting edge, what these economists found about 20 some years ago, is like the cutting edge is guided transformation. Like what we'll pay the most for and what we want the most customized is transformation. But transformation needs to be guided because where culture's at is not inherently transformative. It's inherently carrying the culture or the weight of the past. So what moves into the future, the dynamicism of the future, to me, it speaks of collaborative intelligence, but also guided collaborative intelligence. That like that someone has to be like, okay, in any collaboration, it's like this is the vision. Like this is where we're going, because otherwise we don't really know what we're collaborating on. And that's where you get like a bunch of people getting together and they're trying to collaborate. Nothing big happens, like nothing really happens. And so what I've discovered over time is that guided transformation as a business model really, really works the best. And because part of it is because we're in a market economy, and that transformation requires, even good collaboration requires structure. Because without structure, without a structure that's geared towards development or growth, it fizzles. It fizzles, it fades, it falls apart. And so everything that I, am about at this point is like getting people to actually, this is what we're doing at wellnesspro.academy, and clubthrive.global, which are my new layers, my new companies essentially. And it's all based on a club model, on what is it like to be in a growth community that's actually going to specific end results, to desired end results. So in like Club Thrive, we've got hero and heal. So people who need to heal, they're going to go into Club Heal and they're going to heal. And once they've healed enough that they have an abundance of energy and direction and vision and they're grounded in that, then they go into Club Hero with the other people that are in Club Hero. Because what we know is at that point, when you have the structure for guided transformation, what was out of reach comes into reach for the individual. And that to me is so, so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Now you had, this is a quote from you. You said, "I'm indebted to my business teachers as much to my yoga enlightenment teachers on this path of living a free and full life based on Dharma and Bhakti." Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because, it's like if we didn't live in a market economy, or whatever we want to call it. It's not a perfect market economy. It is what it is. But like, if you want to have impact, you've got to be willing to work with how the world works. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that have really focused on how to do that in a highly transformative way, where you're not bargaining with your own integrity. You're actually up-leveling your own integrity in the process. And so the people that I've been influenced by, I mean, obviously in spiritual, actually, I've had spiritual guides and gurus that have less integrity than my business mentors. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to name names, but like, just because a community is oriented towards spirituality doesn't necessarily mean they have higher integrity than a community that's based on business growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What have been your biggest challenges and also your greatest rewards from, it's over 20 years of doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest challenges have been really around team, around understanding, like I'm naturally, people will be surprised to hear this, but like I'm naturally more of like I would even say introverted. Like I really value time alone. I'm a visionary. I like to research and write. I like to think and plan and do strategic planning and build things. Like I like to build things. I like to build business. I like to build communities and clubs that grow, and I build curriculum. I write books. Like these are all things that require a lot of building energy, which is it's sometimes collaborative, but for me, it's often also done alone. So I know when to collaborate. I know when to like just do the work and then ask the right questions, right? And so growing a team around my work has really been it was insanely hard. Now it's easy, but that barrier was super hard to overcome, because at some point I just wanted to go write the book, or I just wanted to go develop the course, or just wanted to, and not deal with all the people in management industries that come up with an organization or a company. So that was a lot. That was really hard for me to overcome and to find the right people and to do that in a way that is win-win for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is just on a personal level, but the balance between masculine and feminine and like doing and being, because I'm naturally, I think probably because of birth trauma and being raised by like the Dr. Spock method of like, it's the opposite of attachment parenting, by not having a very empowered matriarchal line on either side, on either my mom's or my dad's side, having like, and this is just cultural. I think I'm not, anyone listening to this will be like, yep, check all those boxes myself. I'm many ways, my pattern is like, she's one of the boys playing in a man's world, that sort of thing. So I've sacrificed some of my feminine nature, which has now become sacred because of that sacrifice. And I'm not sure, like, I don't think there's an easy way around that. For me, it took a lot of healing crises, honestly, and a lot of experimentations. Like in my new book, there's, in Uninflamed, it's about primal habits. And, one of these primal habits is, trip. So humans have sought existential experiences for really as long as we can track back, like as long as we know, and whether we get there through breathing techniques or meditation techniques or time on the mat, time on the cushion, or whether we get through the entheogen plants. Entheos means to be in God, entheos, right? Just like enthusiasm. Well, the entheogen plants are ones that shift human consciousness into different brainwave states and give often some plants and even some chemical entheogenic type medicines like MDMA or LSD. Often people are having a quick shift into the opposite, like so often into the feminine, for people that have sort of left that behind. So for me, recovering that self-sense has been something that I've now learned how to make that sacred and how to update and stop pushing goals into becoming, but really to receive and work more with desire, what I want to do when, and not force myself to do things when I don't feel like it. It's a really hard lesson.
Yeah. And also very rewarding, I would think, as well.
Insane. I'm glad I learned it at 50 and didn't die in this lifetime not knowing that. Yeah.
So we're just coming to the conclusion of this, but let's end with you're both a partner and a parent, and how to balance, the sacredness of the work that you do with the sacredness of, your family life. You want to say a word about that?
Sure. Yeah. And I was really, I feel, Al, I feel like really blessed that I went hard. I'm a very intense person. And so when I go into a subject matter, I'm all in. I'm not like someone who hangs out. I'll hang out on like the line until I decide whether I'm in or not. And if I'm in, I'm all in. And so my path with Ayurveda was all in. And part of that was like understanding the postpartum Ayurvedic protocol. And I created a course on it when I was pregnant with my daughter called Mama Birthing. And I think I still have mamabirthing.com. I think it still exists. And so before Indy was even conceived, I was in a strong, I would say, universal alignment. I had done a lot of work on myself, and had a lot of guidance. And so actually even conceiving was an act of surrender, where I was studying with Sally Kempton at the time, who was, I'd say, an enlightenment guru, in a small course, again, in a guided club. Guided transformation goes back to that. And we were sitting twice a day as a community of 20 around the globe, and with very specific teachings dated back to an old text called the Shiva Sutras, written about 1000 AD. And I was doing these practices, and every time I'd sit, like, it was wild. It felt like a divine directive. It was like, it's time to conceive. And then my ego would freak the fuck out and be like, no way, I got a life, I got plans. But every single time I would sit, which was twice a day, every day, it was like, oh my gosh, this is so strong. And so I surrendered to it instead of, because I could see the pattern with the ego on a very subtle level, and I could see that it was fruitless, like that it wasn't, the ego is not going to win with the practice and these ancient practices were going to win. They were going to win the battle on the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield. So I let go and I was like, fine, then figure it out. Cause like I looked at my schedule. I'd been following fertility awareness method for over a decade at the time. And I was like, every time I'm fertile, I'm out of town. So I was pretty busy traveling and teaching Ayurveda and yoga around the country. And I was like, you're going to have to figure it out then. And they're back-to-back cancellations of events, random, totally randomly. And I was home and I was just in surrender. So that's how Indy came in. And then postpartum, I did the Ayurvedic postpartum regimen, the 40 days of receiving massage, of allowing myself to be fed and reshaped into motherhood, which is such a beautiful practice. And I was able to some degree to really protect my Agni. And Indy was raised on self-massage or receiving massage, and she was full attachment. So she never took a bottle. Like we missed the window. I wasn't trying that hard, I wasn't trying to attachment parent. It's just like, I was just in surrender, and that's what happened. And so through her, I learned intimacy that I had never had at the breast with my mother. And I learned surrender, and I learned rhythm and timing and all that. And so I was up at Targhee, our local ski hill yesterday I was biking with my husband, and we decided to have a beer after the ride. It was this beautiful day, kind of like an Oktoberfest sort of vibe up there. So I walked into the bar and I ran into her gymnastics coach. And she hasn't seen Indy because Indy made varsity soccer. And so she's taking a couple months off gymnastics to play with the high school soccer team. And this coach who's worked with Indy since she's maybe 5, she's like, Indy's one of my favorite people in the world. And I hear this a lot from people that know my daughter, and like the whole "it takes a village" has just come in handy. So what I find in general with parenting, and it's like if you stay in integrity early on, like in any game you play in your life, whether it's like trying to get yourself to meditate or fast or be more responsive as a parent or whatever, like the more all in you are the earlier on, the more all in you are, the easier it gets later. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who's like, well, I wasn't all in early enough on whatever aspect of your life, just be all in on that now. Mm-hmm. And then later it'll get easier. Mm-hmm. So I kind of keep finding that. So like right now with Indy, I'm not with her that much because she's gone. She's really active and busy and social. So she's very extroverted and loves life and loves all the things that she's interested in and all that. So my role is like, it's so much about intimacy and integrity. I mean, it's still the same thing she taught me as when she was a baby. And so for now, it's like just being that whenever I'm with her, because it's not that much time. So it's easy for me to 100% be all in and not be distracted by anything or anyone else. So like even this summer, I took her to Europe with me for close to a month. I had an event in Lisbon, and she's learning skills when she's with me. And I set a pretty high bar, of what my expectations are for her at any age based on what she's demonstrating capability with. And so that was part of it too, is just being no bullshit, being high integrity with her. And it's magical. And then with my husband, he and I, a few years ago, we started noticing just like this weird, I don't know, kind of growing apart, or the sense of going through the motions, I'd say. It's kind of like where you go into autopilot. I mean, he has a business, I have a business, we have a kid, we're busy, we ski, we surf, we have a very full life. But there was this level of, what do we really want to do next? And so my second book, Master of You, is basically a strategic planning book with Dharma. And we went pretty much all into that. I dragged him along is probably an accurate way of saying it, but I was committed to that. Like if it was going to work, that was the way it was going to work at that time. And what's happened over the last 5 years is like we've created a third company together that really plays to how our unique strengths overlap, and that's formed how now we have like it's this really cool, interesting time together. Like and it's created so much more intimacy in our relationships, and we both needed coaches too. Like rather than going towards therapy, we've gone towards coaching, and I'm not anti-therapy at all, but for us coaching, like us each having very powerful, awake, transformative coaches that understand both business and life and family, like that has made all the difference, so that he's growing and I'm growing. And then with our shared business, we're able to grow together. And it's super fun, the opportunities that's created for us.
Cate, thank you so much. This has been really fun talking to you and sharing your insights and just the way your life has, gone along in this. As you were saying that you haven't pivoted much. You've changed things, but they've all been in the service of a picture that started a long time ago. And so, thank you. And all the best to you with all of your businesses. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, well, if you're a wellness pro, it's wellnesspro.academy. That's where we're doing stuff now. And if you're more on the healing hero path, it's clubthrive.global.
Thank you. And for the Inspired Living with Ellen Broderick podcast, we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us.